Right, okay. Well, this is one of my first sessions recording for YouTube and the likes. I want to start documenting my journey of playing with AI tools, and I've not used ChatGPT 5 much. Well, very little. It's only just come out, and they've got this agentic mode. And one of the problems I have is one of the app ideas of many that I've got is to have some sort of visual URL, um, visual bookmark tool. So where you've got all your bookmarks stored in Safari, Chrome, and all the rest of it. Sometimes it's just not useful being a bookmark bar. Some people have them in folders. I want something more visual, and I haven't found anything that quite fits what I want. So, being a developer, I'll develop it. I've got other product ideas, but that's the first one. And originally I thought, oh, well, I'm going to use Viz URL as in visual URL. URL is just another way of saying a web address. It's a bit geeky, doesn't quite fit, but not everybody would know it, in other words. So I thought originally I'll have that domain though. And then I started looking around and saw that on X, there's somebody that's reserved Viz URL and their domain is visurl.com, but they joined in 2008. It's basically a dormant Twitter/X account. And I think at the end of the day, X should start purging some of these. It doesn't matter if it impacts the number of accounts that are on X, who gives a toss, basically. The main thing is the number of users that are engaging. So get rid of them and let somebody else have these orphaned accounts. If they're not actively being used, not adding value, get rid of them. There's probably a few of mine over the years that they could also clean up. So I was thinking, well, it took me a while to actually find that name and then find that the Twitter one was gone. And you could argue, well, what about LinkedIn? What about Facebook? Basically, the top social media apps. So I thought, why not just ask AI to go off and come up with, say, 3 names, and then make sure that there is no domain name that exists for them and that there's no Twitter account and so on and so forth. I've not experimented. This is my Hello World test recording. So at the same time, I decided that I'm going to go off and actually just experiment and see where we end up. Now, I'm using ChatGPT from OpenAI. I've obviously got browsers on the right, but I've also got something called Super Whisper installed, which means I can talk rather than type. So things should be a little bit quicker. So let's see if I can describe what I want clearly enough. I've got a app that I'm starting to write, and I was going to reserve the domain name with a company called 123reg. But although it shows that the URL visurl.com, spelt VIZURL.com, is actually free, available, but when I looked around on Twitter, now known as X, there's an account that's sitting there dormant that isn't actually being used. So I'd like you to go off and find 3 alternative domain names that would be applicable to a visual bookmark tool. It will be highly collaborative. People can share them. It will be available on web browsers, on desktop as well as mobile, and it will be on Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, and so on. The primary use for me is to be able to organize my bookmarks by some label or multiple labels, and that could be AI generated, but also spatially 2D, 3D, and so on. So that's basically what I want as my tool. So I want you to come up with 3 creative names for that product that are very, very short, 1 word preferably. I don't mind it being Latin based and everything else, but I'm sure a lot of those domains are already gone. So job number 1, 3 good names. Then I want you to go off and research whether those domain names are available. I prefer .com. I don't mind using .app or .ai as my domains. Once you've done that, I need you to go off and double check whether the social media platforms have availability for the same name. They have to be the most common platforms today. I know of some, such as Twitter, also known as X now, and Instagram, Pinterest. Do as many as you feel fit for whatever's common today. Up to, top 10. And then I want you to go off and check that the domains that you are suggesting, the 3 of them, that they're all available. I need the summary given back to me in a tabular format so I can quickly glance and see for all the domains you suggested what availability there is from the web domain all the way through to each and every one of those social platforms. Can you go off and do that? So a bit of a test, because I'm actually asking it to do 2 things: that original research about the name, and then basically go off and search X and see whether it's available and everything else. So that will be interesting. I'm going to turn on notifications. I haven't turned it on for this before. So I'm just accepting that on the other screen. And now we can see in OpenAI that it's going off and thinking about all of that. So this is probably a good time to kind of tell you what my purpose is on this brand new screencasting journey. I'm Rob Wilson. I'm using the alias online as Robbie W Online. Don't know why that came about, but it works. I'm a software developer, engineer, CTO of a company called Vehicle Smart in the UK. Very successful. CTO because I love technology, I love playing. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in any specific tools, but I do like to exercise the creative right of going off and trying things and see what sticks. I've got some preference to using Amazon Web Services as my web stack because it's just rock solid. For the 10 years we've been running, it's been stable beyond belief. No downtime, touch wood. And I use within that the Elastic Beanstalk to provision EC2 instances, which is like virtual private servers, so they can scale up and everything else. Use some other services such as Amazon S3 for storage, SQS for queue management, SNS for notifications. We've hand-rolled our own push notification server because we started with Google FCM and that got changed to GCM. We started actually with App Center to send push notifications and they're gone now as well. So we've got our own push notification service. And likewise, we use our own email campaign software, which is built into our own Vehicle Smart services. Because MailChimp, when you grow over a certain number of emails that you're sending, become quite expensive. So all we needed was templated emails, and so we hand-rolled our own. What else can I tell you? Basically, not only am I doing Vehicle Smart, but I, 1 day a week maximum, but haven't done anything for a few months, help out a friend with a product called My TeamSafe, which is a lone working solution. And that will notify your boss, your partner, whether you're late checking in. To you might have an hour, every 2 hours, you might say that you're going to check in. If you don't, then escalates some sort of notification to them. That could be an SMS message, a text message, or it could be a push notification, or it could be email, or it could be a phone call to your phone because you might have ignored every other medium. And if you don't reply, then it starts escalating to your supervisor, your partner, and so on. So it's a very, very good tool. I wrote it originally back in the day with something called Appcelerator, so like a JavaScript multi-platform solution. It was quite janky, but it did work, but we outgrew that, and so I started using something called Xamarin Forms. So I'm now a .NET developer. It was Xamarin Forms is now .NET MAUI. It's recently changed, and so the app is going through a migration, which we've already done for Vehicle Smart because we've gone through the same technology stack and everything else. So that's my two main hats that I wear, but I've also got a keen interest in sharing my knowledge with other people. I've done it before. I've had a long pause, very long pause, and now I'm getting back into that. And it's partly because I want to share things with other people so you can learn too, but it's also for a selfish reason that it will hopefully motivate me to do some of these other product ideas that I've got in my head, but procrastinate, don't start, and everything else. If I'm sharing it with you out there, then it's going to keep me motivated. And if I can reserve, let's say, an hour every morning before I start my real work, then if I get into that habit, then there will be progress. Things will happen. They might not all work, and it's like throwing spaghetti at a wall. Sometimes it will stick, sometimes it won't. So I've got a number of product ideas. I was just trying to list a few before we started, just to make sure that I remembered some of them. One is a visual bookmark tool. This is what we're looking at here, the Viz URL. Came up with other names in the past. And well, I won't go into detail about that one because you've heard the summary for AI to go off and try and find out some domain names for it. There will be sessions within this channel that will be specific about Viz URL or whatever it's going to end up being called. There'll be ones for the other ones as well. The other app ideas, some of them are apps, some are websites, some might be VR games and everything else. But so Viz bookmarks, Viz URLs, whatever they are. There's also a cross-platform app builder. It would be interesting because I've done something loosely similar before from a web technology point of view, an app that could build anything, and it went horrifically wrong. This would have to be constrained to the point of I needed to generate apps, but it's specifically apps that would have a login screen. Then you navigate to another screen and that will show some information. It collect it from RESTful endpoints and display it, and the user can edit it, and it'll be CRUD based and everything else. And many apps are kind of like this. And the difference here is I want it to be able to work on desktop. I want it to work on mobile. I want it to work on really small form factors like watches. And so I want to declare my user interfaces in like a semantic way. This information is going to be in a list, but this field is going to be the critical information that must be on a watch. But if you're on a slightly bigger display, then display more information. If you're on desktop, then it might be master detail, views, and everything else. Making a rod for my back, I'll tell you, because it's not going to be easy, especially when I'm thinking, well, I want this to be native. So whatever I write will probably end up transpiling to native code for Swift UI for iOS devices, and then, God, what's the Java one? Kotlin for Android. But I really don't like Android, so I don't want to spend too much time there. So there are tools out there like skiptools.io, and that would take Swift UI and basically spit out your Android app for you. So that's kind of nice, but I still need something that would generate that Swift UI for me from my semantic web stuff and everything else. What programming language would I use for that? Well, I could just have Swift and then it just works with Swift UI, but I just want to experiment with something more abstract. So it might be YAML, JSON, XML. It could use a language that already exists, such as Rust, because Rust can cross-compile onto many platforms, including iOS and so on. But I really don't know. So I'm going to be exploring by using AI to basically answer a lot of those unknowns, deferring a lot of it to as late as possible. And then whatever I generate, hopefully it will be repeatable. So I'll have a little Hello World test app and say, I want a list of 100 things in the list so I can scroll and see how fast it is, how quick does it launch the application. But perhaps first I'd have to do some learnings about Swift UI, maybe do the Apple official file new tutorials and work through it and see how you start a new project, and do the same for Android, unfortunately, too. That will give me the very, very basics of how do you add a label onto a view, and is it called a view, is it a window? Learn the basics, but I wouldn't start with Objective-C. It will be Swift UI. That being said, whatever I generate might not generate Swift UI. It might generate something else that doesn't need Swift UI. Who knows? It's going to be very exploratory. Anyway, spent too long on that one because I really don't know how it's going to end up. But I like the long-term goal of just playing with, some of these tools that I want to write. What if I could write them in my own very quick, expressive way that AI can even learn very quickly how I would define those user interfaces, and I could specify in Markdown what my business logic is, and then basically say, right now, run the tool in the Markdown, and it will generate the Swift UI for me. And that little AI tool might be all I need. I don't know. The difficulty, of course, is making it look good. And most of the user interfaces I write don't, which is why my business partner, James, basically has taken on that role now. And very good at it, he is too. So I don't have all the answers, and the apps might work, they might be really functional, but they might look absolutely pants. And we'll just have to see. Don't know. And then there's my long-term goal of a game that I've got some ideas how I want it to work, and I haven't seen anything that really works the way I want it to be. Now, I'm a bit of a Star Trek fan, more than Star Wars, and I particularly like it when they're in a scenario where ships are attacking each other and there's a lot of strategy involved, and like the Wrath of Khan, where Khan's thinking about things in a very 2D space, and whereas they're obviously in space in 3D, so it's a little bit silly. But the point being is you still have to sort of decide whether you're going to put all of your power into the shields or into the engines or your weapons, and what weapons you're going to use, because certain ones will deplete, other ones will rebuild over time. Anytime I see these space games, they're more like space trading games, and they go on forever, or the graphics look amazing but there's just no strategy. So I haven't written a game for over 30 years. The last time I wrote one was on an 8-bit computer, and it certainly wasn't 3D. So I wanted to use Unity, and I started that some years ago. No AI back then, and I was quite excited when I had the Oculus headset on, and I managed to create a box basically floating in front of me and then spinning it around and everything else. What's the chances of somebody ringing me on this first session? I'll ring him back in a bit. And so yeah, that game, I've got a lot of ideas for it, but it involves a lot of maths, a lot of 3D, and that's two areas I do not know at all. It's a lie. I know some basic trigonometry, and I know using matrices, and I know about XYZ coordinate vectors and raycasting and some of the terminology, but I couldn't write any of those algorithms, and I would be probably using a game engine, but not necessarily, because with AI you can go close to the metal and say, right, this is what I want it to be. And so we might end up doing a mini game engine just to satisfy my needs, or I can obviously use something like Godot, or Godot, however you want to pronounce it, which is a new game engine which is spawned out, I believe, from the likes of the unrest in the other game engine, Unity, which I can't remember the politics, but they kept rocking the boat and the developers were getting really frustrated. So I believe because of that, Godot became either was born or became quite popular, very popular. It's nowhere near as feature rich, but there's very little in the way of footprint or bloat because it's not been around for very long. It's very fast. There's multiple programming languages that you can use, GDScript and C Sharp. C Sharp is my favourite, but it's a little bit janky in Godot. You can do a lot more with less code with their own proprietary GDScript, but it's not that difficult to follow. It's very productive, it's very fast, and so I don't know what technology stack to use yet, but principally what I'm interested in is average graphics. It doesn't have to be amazing graphics, it just has to be very playable, high frame rates, networkable, playing with other people online. Primarily VR headsets. I want to really embrace the 3D-ness, and you'll be able to see the other ships, and literally you'll be able to see the other person moving around doing things in their ship. It's not necessarily a great big starship, it could be a small ship, so you can literally see them pulling levers and everything else, so you can think, I see what they're going to do next. So very strategic, not turn-based, very much real time. Yeah, so many app ideas. Now I was hoping that during the time that I was waffling, then this GPT-5 thinking mode and agents would have finished. But as you can see here, it's going off and doing lots of stuff, presumably. And as far as I know, you can ask it, how is it going? How is it going? Can you give me a progress update? And I think not so much of a progress update. So what we might end up doing is breaking this up as the first video, because it's an introduction about me, and at the same time introducing you to what my initial goal is here with the first product. Oh, hello. Page just scrolled up on its own. Still not saying anything. It's thinking. It says it stopped after 16 minutes, so I don't know if I've vetoed it from completing that task, which would be a real shame. Here's what I've done so far. So VizPad, VizTag, Placia, and began checking their domain availability using WHOIS and RDAP services. VizPad and VizTag appear to have the .ai domain available, but not .com.app. Placia appears to have .a and .app available, but not .com. I'm currently checking the availability of these names across common social media platforms. I'm confirmed that some handles on X are already taken, whilst others are available. I'll continue checking the remaining platforms for all three names, and will organise the results into the summary table that you requested. Well, we'll leave that running then. So yeah, we'll stop the recording here. I'll put it out there on some channels and see how it goes. And then hopefully the next recording might be, we've picked a domain name and we're just going to start asking AI to capture the requirements that are in my head, put it down into markdown file format is what I prefer to use with AI, and then iterate on that and basically keep the requirements being evolved until I'm happy that I've brain dumped enough, and get the AI to ask me questions and test my assumptions. Is there anything that's ambiguous? And then really get it down to the point where we think that we know that there's enough information in there for an MVP, a minimum viable product. Then we may even pause there and move on to another product. But if I'm learning to use Swift UI, or I'm learning to do some web technologies, then there'll be another set of videos specifically tagged or named for that technology stack. So if it's a React Native or React, then there'll be video series where you can follow along there if you want to. The whole point is, if you're interested in this one about VizURL, then everything will be prefixed in the way the video is VizURL episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, and you can just watch along, dip in and out if you want, catch up 2 months time, see how it's going, see how it looks. Or you might decide that you prefer the Star Trek-y type one, in which case when I come up with that product name, you can follow that one. Or if you're interested in .NET MAUI, follow along with those episodes instead. Where am I online? Well, basically, I'm only on X. Well, I am on some others, but I really don't like them. And X is good for where I can learn about news, about technology, and there's quite a lot of engagement there from my perspective. So you can find me on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it nowadays, as at Robbie W Online. So yeah, certainly follow, reach out if you like. There's not a lot here for you, I appreciate. And I'm going to try and keep this low editing. I don't want to be spending all my time editing these screens. Hopefully they look good on 4K. This is being recorded literally in 4K ultra high definition, which resolution I can never remember, and I had to write it down earlier. 3840 by 2160 pixels, which is like tons. But for me to be able to read that, because I'm getting old, it's actually a lower resolution on my Mac. I can't remember the exact dimensions, but I think it's the 1920 by 1080. So normal HD, not ultra high definition. So it's easy to read. But all the pixels are being recorded at ultra high def mode. And why would I do that? Because I've been advised by AI this is the way to go. And the purpose is this is my master, very high definition. And when I start recording and separating this out to different platforms, I can zoom in on certain areas, blow up the text, and you will not get any pixelation or anything. You can zoom in and it will just work. So it's taken me a while to get the right setup because I tried forcing it through various software, virtual screens and everything else, and whilst it kind of worked, it was messing up my other accounts on the same computer as I logged out of one, logged in the other. And in the end, I learned that my external monitor, the BenQ whatever model it is actually a 4K monitor, but it was not presenting itself as one. So here we are, very early, very raw. Probably look back on this in 2 years and cringe, but that's fine. I don't care. You've got to start somewhere. And hopefully, if I look back in 2 years, it means I've done 2 years of solid, consistent recordings. So let's see how it goes. Thank you for listening this long if you have. I'm not going to look at the metrics as much as I want to because I do not want to be demotivated. The whole purpose is to keep going, see how it goes. So that's it for this one. Thank you.